Hi everyone, Lisa from the Here and There Collective. I'm so excited because today we're actually coming from Hong Kong, and I'm very excited because we are in the studio with Ka Kiu Chan.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Full Time.
And I'm so excited because your practice is like so fun and expansive, and so I can't wait to like dive right into it. But I'm wondering if you could just like tell us a little bit about it just to start.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ka Kiu Chan. I basically grew up in Hong Kong, and my art practice is mainly on moving images and installations. I do work a lot with found objects, found footages, because I think they contain more collective memories than what we create on our own. And sometimes I alternate those stuff and try to put it into my own narration. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think even just being in your studio, I can get that vibe as well. Like you like to collect.
Yeah, a lot
right?
of weird stuff here.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting that like your approach to filmmaking is to really kind of collage things together, and I think that I see that in both your films and also in your installations themselves. And I'm kind of curious if you could tell us a little bit about the practice of that. Like, do you collect things sort of as random material to use later, or do you have that idea in mind and then you sort of source material?
I think it comes both ways because, living in like a city, things come to you all the time, and, on your phone, things come to you all the time, and sometimes it just lives rent-free in your head. And then when I write about something, those things in my bank, in the library, in my head, they just come up, and sometimes they just fits right in. But if it doesn't, then I'll go look for something else. When I make an artwork, I always start with, things that I have feelings about during that period, and then I try to sit down and write things about them, and then think about, how do I put them in different forms. Like if they're in a video form, then what footages or what materials that I have already come across with fits, and if it doesn't, then I look for other things that, well, sometimes even those AI generated images, I'm kind of having a difficult relationship with them right now. I try to in the films I'm making now, I try to stick them to things that is not real, like concept of heaven, like in dreams. Those things I try to use AI images or moving images to create those things that we don't know, because we don't actually know what heaven's like, or we don't actually know what inside a nightmare looks like for everyone, right? So for those parts, sometimes I use AI generated things, but most of the time I try to stick to real life videos or like things that other people have created.
Yeah, I really love how your work is, in a way, kind of diaristic, to your point. Like, there's a deeply personal angle to the works that you create. I recall there was like, a series that was really delving into some of the heartbreak that you felt. There's a notion of what is personal is universal, right? Like, the more personal something is to you, the more universal that is felt. And so I love kind of seeing that in your work, and the fact that you do digital with installation really creates this immersive experience for a viewer to really be enveloped in. And I wonder if that's always been how you've approached art, is to kind of consider that audience participation.
I think I do. In the series of video about heartbreaks, it was actually in the time I was still in school, and I just broke up with one of my schoolmates, and it was one of the worst heartbreaks in that time. So I was trying to think about how to do it like a movie recap. Like, how do I put it lightly so I can go through this heartbreak, So I try to make one video, a very brief, very short recap that put this sad story in a funny way, So that's how I deal with that emotions. And then I realized, I actually like making things this way. I actually think it's very like who I am, how I talk about things, and how I digest things that I go through. So I quite kind of stick to that way of making films. And then to the part where, because film, they're always inside the screens, right? So I kind of have to think about, how that thing can extend to outside into the space where it's not just flat inside the projectors, the TVs, or even how a video can be contained in an object. So how to go through the dimensions, Yeah, that's I think how I got to the process of, getting the setups or installations for the video work.
I'm curious about that humor, because I think that's also something that feels very uniquely you, is like, to your point, you're talking about some serious heartbreak, things that are very, and I think like art in general tends to lean towards being more serious. I think it was for Art Basel maybe like a few years ago, but you had a performance where the person would like give a flyer, but then instead of giving it to them, they just like throw it in the crowd. And I just thought that was so hilarious, but also kind of like thoughtful. So I love that sort of juxtaposition of like talking about serious subjects, but like I think you do it very cleverly and like in that humorous way.
That performance actually came from a real life experience. Hong Kong peak hour MTR is crazy, right? So some people is out in the street giving out flyers, and no one was giving them any attention. They were just repeatedly doing this action, and then so I saw them a few step back, and then I was feeling kind of bad for them. I wanted to take one of the flyers, and but then they didn't expect anyone to take it. So we had like a moment of fighting for a flyer. So we were pulling a little bit and was, and then that moment stuck in my head because they must be so sad by then. They must be somewhere else ahead. They were just giving out those flyers. So that moment stuck in my head, and I kind of think an art fair setting would be super super right to recreate that moment because people were just passing by things. And so I have this lady that looks like a very nice Hong Kong mom, and she uses super polite smile and invites you to take one. But then when you take it, she just smiles and drop it on the floor, But some people did win the battle moment, Some people did ooh and took it away. Yeah, but I kind of think, sometimes humor or being funny is one way of being tender also, because it wraps things out in a warmer way, and that makes people easier to receive them.
Going back to, your process of image making, you talked a little bit about using AI to create images of the unknowable, which I find very fascinating. So I'm curious, like, what kind of prompts are you putting in there? Like, are you very specific, or do you kind of allow for almost a collaboration to happen? How does that work?
Well, I always try to do it loosely first, see how it surprised me, and then if it really doesn't work, then I'll try to dictate it a little more. They are kind of like kids that just started to learn what the world is like, what everything is like, and so for example, in the video about heaven and hell, I have this horse that is running around in a very green place, right? And then they just have those, they call it Genesis, like those animals that hats comes this way and then the hat go the other way. They just run back and forth. In the beginning, I was trying to capture a lot of these cute accidents that doesn't look real, that doesn't look like it's ready, or it doesn't look like it's perfect. But I think those is things that is quite precious, because AI is obviously going to be better and better in making images in the future, and these might be only available in this era of time. So it's just like how painters have hands and they know how to draw a hand because they know how the hand works. But AI, they just know, oh, there are fingers in this piece of meat, and they have all the time many fingers and like different joints places. So those are things I find kind of cute and want to keep it in my videos. Yeah.
Writing is also part of your practice, and like I think I remember like some interview you were even talking about like the way you even present text in your video works, for example, is like an intentional choice. How do you think about the writing part of your practice, and how does that kind of flow into the work?
The writing part is the most core part of whenever an exhibition or an artwork happens, I think, because that's always where I begin, you know. Sometimes it comes naturally, just typing. But sometimes, you know, you get stuck there. Like, how do I put this sentence? How to set the tone of it, you know? And it's also because I'm a native Cantonese speaker, and sometimes the tone and the words in Cantonese, I think, and the humor is very hard to translate in English. Sometimes in a video work, the English part just help people to understand it, but there's a little gap between, you know, the language.
So do you normally write things first in Cantonese and then you're doing the translation into English yourself?
Yeah, most of the time, unless it's some phrase in English I heard, like those things sometimes become the artwork titles or slogans inside the show. But most of the time I start with writing Cantonese and then I translate it and I ask them better English speakers to, you know, help me take a look at my grammar. I'm like, oh, see if I put it right, you know?
Yeah, that seems relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even with like the presentation, like I know, like I'm just kind of, I think this mirror kind of recalls that to me, like very like specific placement, almost kind of like a movie at the bottom. Like I'm reading sort of like subtitles. Can you tell me a little bit about like how you sort of frame that up?
At this artwork, the first time I made it was inside a sex toy shop's pop-up exhibition. So right opposite to this mirror is a wall of doodles. So and then I have this subtitle on the mirror, so when people, you know, walk by, it's kind of sets them in that scene, and it's kind of like the movie you're in, but with this subtitle. Okay, last one.
As we kind of like wrap up, like what's sort of in your head these days? Like are there particular, you know, concepts, thoughts, feelings that you're sort of percolating with like in the studio?
Yeah, I'm thinking about 2 series of work, and I'm picking which one should I work my next solo exhibition with. I'm thinking either about a hotel, a motel specifically, because I have a series of photos that I took in right before COVID actually, and then it was a motel that was closed for 10 years, but everything was kept like really nice inside. So I take a bunch of photos, and it feels like almost the people just left the place, but it's closed long time ago. So that is a series that lingers in my head and kind of work more on like how this closed-based have stories inside, you know. And then another one I was thinking about doing something related to office politics, like kind of like a soap opera feel, you know. Yeah, that's the 2 I'm struggling between, but yeah, we'll see how that goes on.
Interesting. Okay. And I feel like I'm reacting to a lot of the things in the studio here, and I'm drawn to this question on the wall, so I'm going to ask you, why do artists have to make art after all?
That's a question I keep asking myself, you know, all the time. Because, you know, making art is making something out of nothing, and it's quite hard to happen. Like, every time it's different. Every time you're dealing with a different topic, and then the things, especially because I don't stick with one material, so everything, there's a lot of problems to solve and a lot of techniques that I have to learn to create the thing that I wanted to create, you know. So with like every time when it's so hard, I was, oh, why do I have to do this to myself? And so that's a question I keep asking myself. But also, like, if we have, you know, survived all this time in making these things happen, there must be something that worth like doing it. I haven't had the answer yet, but I think as long as I still have the energy, still have the eagerness to make these things, then it's worth it, right? Yeah.
That's a good reminder. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ka Kiu, for such a lovely conversation.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see what's next for you. And thank you for having us in your studio.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye bye.